Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today what we're going to be working on is brakes. So I have these two brake setups here. This one has a 43 millimeter mounting hole spacing for the front fork, and this one has a 51 millimeter mounting hole spacing for the back. So since I made my own swing arm and I cut off the brake tab off the stock one, I'm gonna use the same brake mounting tab to mount this brake caliper onto, and then I'm gonna line it up with the wheel, and I'm gonna just weld it on the back end here so we can get that all lined up. So the thing about having it stretched now is that this line isn't long enough. So I found this line braided on Amazon, 70 inches, and it matches to the same that's on this brake kit. So it'll be nice to have the matching brake lines. So I'm gonna just take off this black brake line, put this extended one, that way I can make sure it reaches from the handlebars all the way to the back with the 6-inch extension on the swing arm. So let's go ahead and get at it. So on the front tire, as you can see, I haven't bothered with doing the spacing on it yet because I wanted to make sure I mounted up the brake first. So I'm gonna mount up the brake first here, get it lined up with the disc brake. So after I mount this up, then I'll know how much spacing I need on each side of the wheel on the axle. For the rear, on the other hand, when I made the swing arm, I lined up the wheel with the chain, and I have all my spacing done already. So what I'm gonna do is, like I mentioned before, I'm gonna mount up the brake caliper to the brake mount tab, and then once I have it on the disc somewhat, I'm gonna see where it touches here on the frame, and then that's where I'm gonna mark it, and then take it all apart again and weld the brake caliper tab on here just to make sure it clamps onto the disc in the appropriate location. Okay, so like I mentioned before, I have the wheel loose on the axle because I want to make sure I have the caliper on first, and then line up the spacers in the axle for the wheel accordingly to the caliper. You want to make sure you have a lock nut and a washer on there to make sure it doesn't come out on you while you're riding. Put this in. You want to make sure that it's not coming out too far, because if it comes out, I don't know how good you can see that there, but you want to make sure that that nut doesn't come out. Because if it does, it's going to be hitting the disc brake, and you don't want that. So right now I'm going to go in all the way and try to turn the wheel. Yes, it's binding. You can hear it scratching. See, it's hitting, so I'm going to back up and add more washers. If you were to buy the screws, I got the I got the M8 1.25 40 millimeters. So now I should not say just get the 35 millimeters, and prevent this from happening, I'm gonna have to go and add some more spacers in there to make sure it doesn't hit. Honestly, I kind of like the little stacked look of the black with the silver on there. And afterwards, you want to check it again. So they're scratching a little bit. Just want to make sure that it's not this nut. I want to make sure that it's only the disc pad, the brake pads hitting. Okay, so right now, that rubbing you see, or it's stopping. Okay, so you see when I turn it this way, when I turn the forks to the right, you hear a little scraping, might be the brake pad, it's a little bit. But if you turn it this way, you hear a little, you hear more, you hear the thumping. So that's happening because these screws here that hold on the disc brake to the rim are just slightly hitting that silver mount for the caliper. But that's only because I have no spacers here in the wheels yet. So when the wheel's all the way to the right on the fork, it spins just fine. But once it starts moving to the left side of the fork, that's when it starts rubbing and hitting. So once I get the spacer setting correct on the axle, that rubbing will be gone. So pretty much the brakes themselves are good to go already. Alright, so now I'm gonna use a combination of these axle bushings or spacers and this washer kit. I got both of them from Amazon to make sure I got the centering of the wheel correct on the caliper. I'll put the links for all the parts I bought in the description below. So from that side, back to the palm. Come back. That's what I have to do. Let's see how much one of these washers helps me out here. pretty much gonna be a game of trial and error. Trying different combinations of spacers and washers and until you find the one that lines up correctly. Hopefully the right one's the first one. Saves me a lot of time and hassle. Okay, so there's still a little bit of rubbing, but as long as you're sure that it's not the bolt that holds on the brake disc on the wheel hitting that metal bracket right there, it's not hitting, then they're all good. The light scraping will be from where the disc brake, it's from where the disc is hitting the back pad on the caliper. But after riding it for a little bit, it should go away. It'll wear it down to the point where it doesn't make that sound anymore. And then the clamping power to be from the front one when it clamps down on it. So you should be good. Okay guys, and like I mentioned before, on the back it's gonna be a little bit of a different story, because on the back I already have the wheel lined up with the spacers needed to line up when I put in the motor. So I had to make new mounts for it. So I upgraded to this motor. I had to make sure that my chain lined up on the motor and on the sprocket on the wheel. So all the spacing is already done on the dropouts for the wheel. So I can't change that. Or I shouldn't. So for the back wheel, what I'm gonna do is I have the brake mount for the stock swing arm. So what I'm gonna do is I have the bracket for the brake mount on the stock swing arm. I'm gonna mount the brake caliper on the brake mount, and after that, once it's already on here, I'm gonna see where I need to put it on here for it to line up with the disc brake, with the After that, I'm gonna put it on. I'm gonna see it, put it on. After that, I'm gonna put it on here and see exactly where I need it to be for it to clamp onto the disc, and then I'm gonna mark it with a marker where I need to weld it in order for it to line up perfectly. So make sure, like I said before, make sure you have your lock nut and the washer. You can also use Loctite if you have that. Just go ahead and put this on here. And like we did with the front. And like we did with the front, you want to make sure that bolt's not sticking out of that hole when you look at it sideways, to avoid it hitting the disc when it's spinning through. We're going to take off that stopper. So I'm mounted on the disc. So the disc has these highs and lows on it. You want to make sure you put it on the high. So I think having it somewhere around here, or make it easier for me to line it up, this flat section with this flat part on the swing arm would be best. Now I just gotta figure out how far forward I need it in order for the highs of that disc to go through the caliper. Right there seems to be pretty decent. We'll hit it there. Oh, that was butter right there. It's also kind of hard to do with this, with the cable connected to it. Go all the way back as far as you can. So that means the high on the disc. Push it about that far. Got a little tiny bit further. So like about right there. So I marked both the bracket and the swing arm in 2 spots at least. Now you know how far forward you need to go to. A little bit. Yeah, I believe that's perfect right there. So there we have it, kind of roughed up where we want it. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tear down the whole bike because I want to paint it too. So I'm gonna tear everything off again. I'm gonna leave the wheel on it, take it downstairs. Where I've marked off the rough marks where I want to put the mount, I'm gonna do a spot weld. Make sure it's good, make sure it spins, and then take the wheel, take the brake caliper off, weld it completely on, and then I'm gonna go ahead and paint the frame. Alright, so got the welder taken out, set up, ready to go. Just gotta double check, make sure everything's still right. Where I marked the set, where I did the markings right here. Sure it lines up. Make sure the wheel still spins freely. No binding. So now I go ahead and do a tack weld here. Make sure it's still good, and then afterwards take off the wheel and finish doing the rest of this weld there. As you can see, that's all you need is a little tack weld, just to make sure it holds it in place. Doesn't move too much. And then double check it spins freely, no binding, and then you're good to go. Now I've got to take, like I mentioned before, got to take the wheel off, finish doing that weld, and then we'll be good to mount it. So right here I just added the clamp to make sure that once I start welding on this side, the bracket doesn't get bent back this way, because when you're welding you're actually pulling metal towards the side that you're welding. So to prevent it from bending this way, I put the clamp on this side to try to keep it straight and minimize that bending. Okay, so right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the motor. I'm gonna get everything off the frame as much as I can, cleaning up the welds. And then with my grinder, I'm gonna use a sanding disc, a worn out one, so I can roughen up the metal just to give the spray paint something to grab onto when I spray paint it. have to be perfect, so roughen it up a bit just so the paint sticks up. Just get all those down. Forgot I need a kickstand as well. Forgot I need to weld on my kickstand tab so I can put my kickstand on. Weld around there somewhere. Something like that. That should be good enough. Alright, so we're gonna go ahead and paint the bike. I'm going with this little chameleon color. Hopefully it turns out good. We have to do a black base coat first though. So we're gonna get started on that first.